So that was Mendelssohn's double concerto for piano and violin, played splendidly by Isabel Faust and Christian Bezuidenhout under the baton of Sir John Eliot Gardiner. Everyone's coming off stage right now. You'll probably see them passing me. Now, if you were watching the full concert, you'll have noticed that for the overture, the orchestra was standing up and then sitting down for the concerto. In the second half, we have a symphony. They'll be standing up for that too. And to find out the thinking behind this, here's a short film with Sir John Eliot Gardiner.
It was a tradition that started with Mendelssohn in the Gewandhaus Orchestra, and we got documents, got visual evidence that he encouraged all the string section, we don't know about the winds, but the string sections to stand to play. Obviously not the cellos. The cellos were raised on risers, on boxes. What does it do? It makes the string players, or encourages them to play more solistically. It encourages them to stand a bit closer to each other because there's no chair and no barrier of a chair, so that you can get a little bit more cohesion in the group. It allows them to be freer. They can move from side to side just as they would if they're practicing or playing a concerto. And recently, starting with the Bavarians and then now with the LSO, the Winds said, well, why don't we stand as well? So they're standing as well. So the only people sitting actually are the timpani, because he can't play his timps standing, and the cellos and the double basses. I think it gives a different aura to the performance. It feels as though the engine room of the orchestra is more in evidence, as it were. It gives their engagement a visual dimension. And it's not a sort of item of cardinal importance to me, but it's something that I think it should be encouraged, and it's enjoyable. And we will be sitting down for the concertos and for the overtures, so there's not a great kerfuffle. But for the symphonies, we'll be standing.
So, to talk to me about this issue of standing up and lots of other things, I'm joined by one of our second violins now. This is Julián. So, first question. Hello.
Hi.
What do you think about the standing up? Do you like it?
I do like it, not for a long time, but yeah. When the pieces are short enough, you can get some break here and there. It's liberating. It's quite a difference. It makes quite a difference. So yes, I'm a fan.
When it's a full, because I understand on tour you stood for a whole concert.
Yeah, we still have the concerto to sit down.
Yeah.
So it's the overture, and then we have a big break, and then yeah. So yeah, it's good enough. It's good time to be standing up. Good time to have a break. Yeah.
And do you think it affects the sound? Because Sir John Eliot said it's all about cohesion and things.
Absolutely. I think it does completely. I think everyone feels more comfortable because you're not you don't have to do what the chair says. You just you come back to your practice room basically, and you stand up the way you want, and yeah, you just do whatever you want there.
And be free.
And absolutely free, and you can move, you can turn, it's liberating, as I say, yeah.
So you've been on tour with these pieces and Sir John Eliot. How's that been? Has it been fun?
Great, fantastic. It's always fun to play the same piece, in different halls with different audience. It's always, even if it's the same piece and the same conductors and the same colleagues, always a different experience, and it's fun to experience that. It's always fun to, have fun one day, be a bit more serious the other day. It happens like that.
And I understand you really like Cologne because of the beer.
It's because they have free beer after the concert
After the concert?
Yeah. So yeah, you have a prize if you do it right. So
yeah. Not in between.
It's a great motivation.
Before.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Great motivation.
No.
So you are Colombian.
I am Colombian.
How did you find your way to the LSO? Did you study in the UK?
I didn't.
Oh.
Actually, no. I just went to Spain to work for some years, and then I auditioned here, and I got the trial, and I was going back and forth for a bit, I was living there, but doing the trial here, and then, well, eventually I got the job, and I moved here, and I'm loving it. 5 years and a half already.
Wow, already?
Yeah, time flies.
We have a lot of people watch these streams from Colombia. I don't know if you knew that.
Yes, I hope so.
So this is your chance. You can say something to your Colombians.
In English?
No, in Spanish.
Bueno,
Go for
pues,
it.
Que sigan viendo, que sigan apoyando la orquesta, que bueno, es una experiencia muy bonita, y que los esperamos en el Teatro Julio Mario Santo Domingo en mayo 10 o 11. When we are going on tour with the orchestra.
Yes,
yeah.
so this is very exciting. The orchestra is touring for the first time to South America and to Colombia. You must be so excited.
It is quite an experience, yeah. I don't know how... I have traveled for 5 years, many places, but I haven't been in my hometown. You know, some of my colleagues have done it. I haven't, so I really don't know how it's going to feel. But
and is it going to be your hometown as well?
Yes, it's my city. It's
wow!
Bogota,
and
my
city. How many friends and family in that audience?
Well, let's see how many we can get in.
Yeah.
But hopefully a lot.
That's amazing. Can you imagine the cheer when you walk on stage? Not for the orchestra, for you.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
My pleasure.
And enjoy the Schumann.
I will.
And you'll be standing up, right?
We'll be standing up, yeah.
Okay, I'll see you on stage.
Thank you.
So the second half is filled with Schumann's third symphony, the Rhenish, and David Bruce gave us his unique take on that symphony, talking about how close or not it is to Beethoven and whether or not it's program music. So take a look at this short film.
Hello, my name's David Bruce. Today we're going to look at Schumann's third symphony. Now, it's not something I think that's been explicitly stated, but after all my studies and training as a composer, I came away with the distinct impression that the proper opinion to hold is program music bad, abstract music good. I've often tried to think of the reasons for this and pondered how much I agree with them. I think what it boils down to is that the best art deals with subtleties that aren't easily defined. Art seems to be much more powerfully received when it has space for the listener or the viewer to bring something of themselves to the table, their own perspective, their own sense of meaning. And in this sense, real program music is kind of the propaganda of the music world. It's art that's whacking you over the head with its meaning. There's no subtlety. This chord signifies this thing. And when you listen, you've got little choice but to hear that one annoying thing. The march to the scaffold in Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique is a good example. Although I love the piece as a whole, the famous moment in the fourth movement where the guillotine chops the young artist's head off well, it's hard to hear that moment as anything other than the 2D cartoon drawing it is. So in some sense, yes, I agree with the handed down notion of program music bad, but when you stop and think, a huge percentage of composers have dabbled with it in some form, from Vivaldi's Four Seasons through to Debussy's La Mer and beyond. Schumann himself clearly battled with the sense that program music was an inappropriate thing for a serious composer to be playing with. After initially titling several of the movements of the Third Symphony, he ended up banishing any reference to titles or programs at all. If the eye is once directed to a certain point, the ear can no longer judge independently, he said. But for various reasons, partly perhaps his publisher, and partly a clear desire on the part of audiences to have these kind of descriptive titles, the work is of course known to us all as the Rhenish Symphony. And every program note describes how the second movement originally had the title Morning on the Rhine, and how the fourth depicts a procession outside Cologne Cathedral. But to me, this kind of title isn't the real villain of program music. It's what you might call a suggestive program, and you can find its model in a piece few would deny is a masterpiece, Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. In fact, Beethoven's Sixth has a number of similarities with Schumann's Third. It's one of the few predecessors that, like Schumann's Third, has 5 movements. Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique is one of the few others. Unlike the Schumann, the second movement of Beethoven's Sixth, the Scene by the Brook, depicts a tranquil scene dominated by gently flowing waters. The sense of program music being something of a lowly form was clearly something even Beethoven felt. He said of his symphony, "The whole work can be perceived without description. It's more of an expression of feelings than tone painting." But isn't he being a bit disingenuous there? I mean, the work has cuckoos calling and a thunderstorm. Personally, I think it's time for us to accept that while crude two-dimensional musical depictions may not be the highest of art forms, many masterpieces are full of vaguer visual allusions that do nothing to limit our appreciation of the subtlety of the work. In the best of them, you get a fully formed piece of music which does operate on its own terms and certainly can be listened to entirely in the abstract, but which has this extra layer of suggestion baked in. If anything, I think it adds to the overall ability of the work to connect with us. So I, for one, don't have any problem with images of the Rhine or Cologne Cathedral floating through my mind whilst I listen to the Third Symphony. But to me there is one other suggestive programme at play in this piece, and it's one that very few other composers ever achieve, particularly on the scale of Schumann's Third Symphony. And it's something that I would say is almost entirely responsible for the work's lasting appeal. If it does depict the Rhine, the symphony certainly does so on a day of peace and happiness. It is, above all, I would say, one of the most contented pieces of music in the repertoire. It's sad to think that for Schumann it may have been one of his last happy moments, as he suffered terribly in the last decade of his life. But whatever contentment he felt certainly lives on in this piece of music.
So we have a few minutes left of our interval, and before I tell you about Schumann's Third Symphony, I've got time to just remind you, if you would be so kind, and if you've enjoyed watching this performance, consider giving us a small donation. You'll find out on the screen how to do that, and 100% of what you give, whether big or small, will go towards future performances and streams just like this one. Our next stream is on the 10th of March and celebrates Sir Bernard Haitnk's 90th birthday with works by Bruckner and Mozart. We'll be live for that one on YouTube. You can join us from 6:30 on the 10th. And if you're enjoying the Schumann, this Schumann cycle with Sir John Eliot Gardiner comes to an end this Sunday, Sunday the 10th, here at the Barbican. Sadly, that one's not streamed, but tickets are still available. So, Schumann's Third Symphony is how we end the concert tonight. And as we've heard, it was written in 1850 when Schumann was on a holiday with his wife Clara. And this was one of his last peaceful and happy times before, sadly, mental illness overcame him. And as we've also heard, it has some similarities with Beethoven. It has 5 movements, just like Beethoven's 6th, and it begins in E-flat with a heroic theme, just like Beethoven's Third Symphony. The second movement is where we really start to feel and hear images of being by the river Rhine. A lot of the melodies and accompaniments have this undulating up and down watery feel to them. But of course Schumann told us to be careful and not think too much about these external illusions. The third movement features no brass. I think the horns are in there, but none of the heavier brass, and no timpani, so we have a different sound world. And the whole movement is propelled forward by a 4-note motif, little chromatic idea that you hear at the end of each bar that pushes the piece forward, and you really can't escape it. It's there all the way through. The fourth movement is known as the cathedral movement and is said to represent a march of cardinals through a church that Schumann himself witnessed. Now again, he said the piece wasn't programmatic, but he did write on the score that it was to be played in a solemn style as if in procession. So make of that what you will. And this movement, the fourth movement, features a very scary moment for our trombone section. They begin this movement, PP, very, very quietly, having not played a note since the interval. So it's a very frightening moment for the trombones. They have to enter not knowing really whether they're in tune or what it's going to sound like. But of course, these are the best trombonists in the world, so you won't notice a thing. The fifth movement follows completely exactly on the back of the fourth. So movements 4 and 5 are back to back, just like in Beethoven's 6th Symphony. And like Beethoven's 6th Symphony, the final movement is a sort of feeling of thanksgiving. The symphony ends with a rustic folk dance and a heroic, exhilarating finale. It's a fantastic symphony, played the best you're going to hear it under the baton of Sir John Eliot Gardiner, bringing his Schumann cycle to a close. There's about 5 minutes of the interval left, so we'll leave you with what's going on stage right now. I just have to say a huge thank you and say how well done to our stage team who have moved the seats on, moved them off, moved them on again. They're one of the best stage teams in the world, led by Alan Good, and he might just be on stage now if you take a look in a moment. So we'll leave you with those images, and apparently he's gone. We'll leave you with those images now, and I will see you again on March the 10th. Goodbye.